moving up to the Premier League, wild weekend, really capped off by Liverpool's 6-3 win away at Spurs. Probably the quintessential Spurs performance, really, and Liverpool hitting new heights. Mo Salah becomes the first player in Premier League era history to have 10 goals and assists before Christmas.
And yet, he's underrated.
Underrated and without a contract.
Have you and I talked about the Guardian Top 100 on this show?
We did. We talked about Pulisic
briefly?
at 95, yeah.
Pulisic at 95, which again is a joke. But I will point out that Mo Salah came in at number 11 on that list. And it's not just that he came in at number 11. It's that there are players above him that you just cannot fathom how they could be ranked higher than Mo Salah. And I will point specifically to Lautaro Martinez and Dani Carvajal. Dani Carvajal is a very good player. Dani Carvajal is an excellent defensive, but is he better than Mo Salah? Really? Really? Like, no, he's not. Clearly he's not. Like, I don't. This was an
What is it
aggregated-
about Mo Salah's demeanor, where he plays, even his nationality? Do you think all those things play in part, or do you think that there was like a couple dips around injury that took his prestige away? Like, what has led to him not being respected?
Well, I do think trophies are a part of this, right? And they've won a Premier League title in a season that was kind of weird for everybody to process. I think it has a mental asterisk on it. It just does, right? Is that fair to Liverpool? Probably not.
It's not fair, but it exists for sure.
But it exists, right? It has a mental asterisk on it. And yeah, the Champions League, and he's had those moments, and I think it is. Yeah, I don't know what it is. There are players. This happens occasionally where we just have a blind spot. And
is it like a Griezmann sort of a thing? Like you're the best player on the third best team or something like that?
Yeah, it might be something like that, right? When you play in England and Manchester City is dominating conversation, and again, everything is like, well, Manchester City never loses a game when Rodri's on the field. Rodri automatically gets elevated. Now, again, I can't say Rodri was number one on the Guardian list, by the way. So again, Ballon d'Or winner, number one on the Guardian list. I can't say that people got that wrong. Like, oh, Rodri's not the best player in the world. I can't say that. It's a subjective opinion, and this is 190 people's votes who were tabulated to determine that Rodri was the best player in the world. I can't say they're wrong, but what I can say is it's not like it is an absolute truth that Rodri is the best player in the world. Right? Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
We can vote that he is, but that doesn't mean, and again, there's no real objective way when you're comparing positions and value and teammates and everything else. Like, there's so many factors in why a player is good in a way that shows we should vote for him for something like this, right? Like, if you took all these players out of their individual teams and ran them through like a skills gauntlet and said, okay, let's just use that to determine the best player in the world, it would be a completely different list. Right, at the end of the day, if you tossed out how many goals Mo Salah scored, or how many games City won when Rodri was on the field and how many they didn't, or the fact that he won Spain a European title, like if you took those things out and just like watched them do skills, hit a long ball, finish, trap the ball, like all the basic things, this would be a different list. But it is filled with, our brains are filled with data that is not comparable to another piece of data. You cannot compare what Rodri does for City to what Mo Salah does for Liverpool. Those are different things. They're different jobs. They're both soccer players, but they're asked to do different tasks. So then we get into this conversation, okay, is Mo Salah playing at Liverpool? Is he better than Erling Haaland playing at City?
Right now,
I could argue he is, right? I definitely could argue he is. Erling Haaland's number 3 on the list. If Erling Haaland, who scored goals at Dortmund, who scored goals in Austria, if he wasn't at City, would he have anywhere close to the numbers he has? Probably not. If he was playing at United, he wouldn't have these numbers. He wouldn't be number 3 in the world, but that's not how it works. We have to consider how many goals Erling Haaland scores for Manchester City, or has scored for Manchester City, because it's not happening right now. I don't know. It's interesting to me. And yet, at the same time, I'm very confident in saying that Mo Salah is not a worse soccer player over the last year than Lautaro Martinez. As important as Lautaro Martinez was to Inter, Mo Salah is a better soccer player.
We're going to dig into City and try to find a precedent for this sort of in-season fall from grace. But just to note, City lost again, this time to Aston Villa. Duran, again, shocking the soccer world by continuing to be a goal machine. And another City player, or cast-off City player, Morgan Rogers.
Yeah.
That was really, in my mind, maybe I haven't been watching Villa closely enough, but he absolutely ran the show in midfield.
Yeah, I mean, this is such a weird spot. We're going to talk about City later on in the show again, but this is such a weird spot to try to judge that performance for Villa, who hasn't been as good as they were last year and has struggled a bit at times. I mean, they went through a rough patch that was only not as talked about because City was so bad, right? City was dominating conversation because their collapse, and meanwhile Aston Villa's like, yeah, we're just over here dropping points left and right too. Like it just wasn't. Hasn't been good. So, to see them win that game, add to City's misery, Morgan Rogers popping off, it's fascinating this season so far.
Other notables in the Premier League, Everton held Chelsea scoreless. A big result for Everton. Good for the teams ahead of Chelsea. And then Arsenal stay in the mix, get a big win, over Crystal Palace. And then Luke adding to the chat here, Holland's heart is not at City. Hasn't been all season. Oh, boy.
Doesn't throw his weight around or work as hard as his physicality would let him. Release him to Real Madrid already. I mean, I do think that because things have soured at City, it is very possible. And if there is the sense that the charges looming are going to hurt City's chances of, well, now they've lost the games, they're not going to win the title. But, is that sort of, if you go back in time and you think about the beginning of this run, were the charges looming, putting into the air this idea that we're not going to win anything this year, therefore why am I going to give 100% effort? Even if that's a subconscious kind of thing for a player like Erling Haaland, it is definitely something City has to deal with, and we may see the exodus. It may happen, and it's not even just about I don't want to be at City anymore. It's also about a lot of these players are plus 30, and the age has absolutely been a factor for that club.
I gotta say, just a final note in the kind of weekend review here in Long Balls, that it was pretty sweet. Liverpool and Lions back-to-back on Sunday. That was a pretty good sports Sunday for old Bob.
Good Sunday for Rob Kerr. I'm glad you had a nice one. The Broncos lost on Thursday, and Fulham couldn't score a goal against Southampton. So let's just continue forward. Thank you very much.
Thanks for tuning in. Like and subscribe to the channel. We are on the trek to 500 before the end of the calendar year, so hit subscribe if you haven't already. Hit us up at morningkickaround@gmail.com or follow along at mkickaround on X, Instagram, and what's the other one?
Blue
Sky. There we go.